Hey guys, Kaiser here. Welcome back to my 32 color display. This is the second part of my video where I'll be explaining how this display works. Alright, so I'll just go through step by step how the signal is sent down into the main display. So first of all, you have your control center here, which sends binary data down over here. As you can see, there are actually 9 rail lines. So you have your clock signal first. So every time a binary signal is sent, this rail line will be turned on. And then this is 1, 2, 4, 8, yada yada yada, 64 and 128. These last two lines are to determine where the signal is sent, whether it's an operator, row, column, or color. So you take the signal from the rail line up here to push either the first set of pistons or the second set of pistons, or both, or neither. The signal is sent through. In this case, since nothing is selected, it defaults to a column. The reason why I do this is because I designed this system such that the columns data is the most frequently used, most common data that's being sent. So you have few pistons firing, fewer rails updating, and second will be the row data, where the first set of pistons, or 64 over here, will be sent down. So the solid block moves down here and the transparent block moves down here, sending a signal through the solid block down all the way to the row decoder. Down here, for the column, the solid block will be moved down, and in its place there will be a transparent block preventing the signal from being sent down into the column decoder. Similar things occur for both the operator and the color signal, except that color signal is the second line, and for the operator it's for both sets of pistons. So now to the decoder itself. Right, the decoder, before that there are delay banks over here. Over here, the fastest one is the operator signal, followed by the color signal, and then the column and row have the exact same delay. This allows everything to remain in sync such that I can run everything in a 4 redstone tick cycle. Right, so the signal is sent in to my decoder controller. So I'll use the operator decoder as an example. So it sends a signal through. If that line is on, it will push the piston down, and in a short period later, the piston will push these blocks up again. At any point in time, only one of these observers can send a signal through. So when the rail line is not activated, a signal will be sent through this observer into this block, into this door, selecting the top line of rails, and the bottom would be off because it's going into a transparent block. But if I were to turn this on, you see that it moves. So let's just push that down. Now the top, there's no block for the redstone signal to be sent through, and in the place down here there is a solid block for this door to be selected through this observer, and now this rail line will be on and this rail line will be off. So I'll just quickly fix that. If you've seen my previous decoder designs, this controller is slightly modified such that it updates itself. In my previous designs, when it's selected, it will remain selected until a clock signal is sent. But for simplicity's sake, when designing this, I made it one longer so that it updates by itself, so that the display doesn't get confused. So this decoder, I didn't actually do a proper explanation on my previous videos. So I'll just quickly explain how it works. Like many of the parts in my map display over here, it relies on the fact that a comparator can only receive a 2-tick signal to activate. So when both this observer and this observer, both being a clock signal, gets activated at the exact same time by the rail lines, it will take 1 tick here to go to this repeater, and it takes 2 ticks here to go to this repeater. So back to back, that means that you generate a 2-tick signal into the comparator, turning it on. Unfortunately, due to some update order issues, you can't really attach the comparator to this block directly, expecting it to work all the time. For adding a repeater ensures that no matter in which orientations, which directions, which line is updated first, it will work all the time. If you put the comparator straight after the block, it will work sometimes and won't work other times. To simplify the entire design, just put a repeater there. It'll save you a lot of hassle. Alright, so the problem is with this decoder is that when you select both clock signals at the exact same time, every single line will receive a 2-tick signal, meaning everything is on. That obviously wouldn't work because this is a decoder. So what happens is the redstone tick before this clock signal is sent, a signal will be sent on these lines, and when these lines are turned on, an observer will receive that signal, activate this rail line, and sends it at the exact same time this observer is activated. So if this this data point is not meant to be turned on, this observer and this observer will be activated at the exact same time. And since this is already on, 1 tick later when this observer turns on, it will remain on, so the signal won't be sent 1 tick later. Therefore, the repeater receives only 1 tick, and the comparator does not turn on. So basically, when the signal for any of these, when any of these are received, if this rail line turns on, if it's down here, being the on signal and this being the off signal, if any of them turn on, it would delay the tick over here. Sorry, it speeds up the tick, preventing the delayed tick from traveling through into the comparator, therefore it doesn't turn on. But there is only one scenario in which this rail line is activated over the clock signal only, which is when this all over here, when these are turned on. If even one of them is off or in the wrong order, let's say this, the observer will send a signal down to the rail line, making it go faster, sending 1 tick only. So that is how this comparator works. How this decoder works. The same for the red, the yellow, and the blue, and the other green decoder from the other side. So it sends the signal up through here, through here, through here, down to this wall of stone brick walls to transfer the signal down over there. So whenever you've selected a setting, let's say brown for single selection or cyan for auto shift forward, what would happen is that it will push the block over here, and that allows this clock signal is being received from the color decoder. So it only activates whenever a color is sent, tells it to basically the entire display functions off every time the color signal is received before it sends which pixels to turn on and turn off. So when this is pulsed, this fires forward, sends a signal down to your shift forward, and when this shifts forward, this will be shifted down. So the white line over here is a reset signal. So it updates this rail, goes here, and it passes this rail into this observer, toggling this back up again. So that's how the reset signal knows when not to toggle a specific setting. So it works for single selection, auto forward, so auto backwards, and auto forward. And for the clear all line, it's just a solid block. There's no repeater over there. I forgot to mention, when a setting is selected, let's say auto shift forward again, the observer pulses this piston, therefore it pushes it down. In this case, since it's already off, it should be here. So that's how it works. You pull the line here to your 3 different indicators. So that's how the indicators are set up. Alright, so now down here, you have 4 separate lines. Okay, so the 4 separate lines have your shift forward, shift backwards, your clock signal over here coming from the color, and your clear. So whenever you have your color being selected, lines that are on, so in this case, this column is on, this column is off. When it's on, when the column is selected, this column decoder sends a pulse, turning this comparator on, updating this observer, pushing it forward. So now this column is on, and when the clock signal is received, it sends a signal through the iron into this line here, going down all the way. That's how you know that this column is selected on, and this column in this case would be off. So when the block is here, it's off. For the auto shift forward and auto shift back, what it does is that it activates this line and then this line. So what would happen is that sends an observer signal down there. When it's on, it will send a signal to the node block down here and sends a signal to the next one over here. 3 ticks later, it pulses this piston. So since this is on and this is off, this will turn off. This will turn on, and that will turn off because there's nothing else there. And since this is off and this is on, what would happen is that since you have your reset signal, the reset signal is received in between the time a signal is sent through the observer, and while it's traveling through, everything else will turn off, and when everything else is turned off, the signal that forces it to turn on, so from here, it will force this to turn on, and since this is already on, it will turn off first, and since this column is off, what will happen is that the signal will not be sent through the observer, which is under this observer here. Since the signal will not be sent, so it will remain off. So that's how the auto shift forward works. Auto shift backwards is exactly the same, except that whenever there's a delay here, when it's propagating the signal across this observer repeater, you will remove one of the observers here such that it fires in sync with everything else. So 1 observer, 2 observer, 1 observer. Okay, some of you might be wondering why the reset line in Lime over here uses redstone rather than rails. So first of all, most of the components in my map display I use rails because from my understanding, rails are more lag friendly. Unfortunately, because I wanted single selection and auto shift forward or auto shift backwards to be able to be the settings to be on at the exact same time, there is a scenario when you program this display that you would have a auto shift forward followed by single selection on your column or row. So what would happen would be your auto shift forward would be activated because you're sending a color signal through. So when a color signal is received, it sends to this line up here, to this line here, up here, activates this observer. So this is your clock signal. So it activates the column, or in this here row, and at the same time it sends a signal up here. And if the auto shift forward is on, what happens is it sends a signal to the shift forward line here, which pulses this, which shifts everything once the color signal is sent. So this turns on first, then this, and then this. So that's what happens, and then after that you have your single selection, which occurs 4 ticks later. But what happens is that in order for your single selection to work, it needs to clear everything. So when the single selection is on, what would happen is that the decoder would send a signal to the clock lines here and here, and it takes the signal through here, going through this block, activating the clear signal here in lime down here. So what would happen is, if you use a rail line, what would happen is that when you have your auto shift forward, since this is on and this is off, when the signal is sent for this to turn on because of the auto shift forward, it occurs at the exact same, slightly faster than the clear signal for the single selection. So meaning, since this will turn on and this piston will be turned on at the exact same time, slightly later, this piston cannot fire. So what I did was that I changed it into a redstone line and messed around with the delay such that in normal operating scenarios, this redstone line is only on for 1 tick. But when you have that specific function followed by a single selection, it will be on by 2 ticks. And when this line is on by 2 ticks, what will happen is that this piston remains on for longer than it normally should be, such that when auto shift forward signal is received and tries to fire this, that is already on, so this piston will not toggle. So everything else would be off except the single selection for your column or row. So that's how columns and rows are selected. So it's exactly the same for your rows. Okay, I'll jump slightly back because I didn't explain how the color decoder works. So the color decoder control unit is exactly the same, except that you see in that there are few orange stripes here, here, and here. These orange stripes are for shaders. I'll explain why shaders are important later on. So when a color signal is sent, one of these yellow lines will be turned on, and up to 2 of the orange lines will be turned on at the exact same time. So you might be asking, this decoder, I explained that this decoder only works when a very specific signal sent down the rail is received. But if you choose to ignore certain lines, so those in stone are lines that have been ignored. So in this case here, I ignore the first 1, 2, and 4. That means that every group of 8, so it goes from the lines that are ignored, there are 8 possible combinations, 0 to 7. So that's 8 total. So every time it repeats that 8, so it can be off, it can be on, off over here. So that's this. In this scenario, it is the value of 8, and this shader will turn on, or it's 8 plus whatever, or 16 plus whatever. So it could be 16 plus 16 and nothing, or 16 plus 1, or 16 plus 6, whatever, as long as 16 line is turned on and this is turned off, the shade will fire. So what ends up happening is that when a color signal in this region is selected, the shade signal for this is selected. When a color signal in this region is selected, a shade signal over here is selected. I'll explain why it's on opposite ends later on. And there are actually two shader columns. So this 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 are for the first shade column, and this one is for the second shade column. Now, a very particular thing about this second shade column selector is that it only occurs in multiples of 8 start. So when 0 is fired, when 8 is fired, when 16 is fired. So what I did is that, so with a terracotta block here, orange terracotta block, that means that signal is off. This is the clock signal, so it doesn't matter. So whenever all of the 1s, 2s, and 4s place turned off, it will receive a signal for your second shader column. And so if any of the 1s, 2s, or 4s place is turned on, then the second shader column doesn't fire, meaning that of the 32 colors over here, there are only 4 colors that activate the second shade column. But for the rest of the shaders here, no matter what color you pick, at least one of them will fire. Never two, just one. So it sends a signal down this vertical redstone stone brick walls. Because it takes time for the signal to be sent down the decoder and sent back up here, I introduce delays in between the walls down here such that a color or shade signal is received all throughout down this region here, all at the exact same time. Goes through there, it uses the same principle of 2 ticks for the comparator to turn on. When the column signal is received, goes to this observer here, it pulses this trapdoor down the wall perfectly timed such that if that color or that shade is received and this column is selected, the color signal will be sent down this line. So the reason why I put this gate in here is that if I didn't have this gate, every time I send a color or shade signal, all the lines for all the columns will be sent, and the only thing that decides whether the color should be selected for that pixel will be the column line here. So that means if this column line is activated and this is off, so since this is on, we know that we want all of this to be turned on, but since this is off, really there's no point sending a signal down there. It just creates more lag. And because due to the nature of the individual pixels here, it takes a little bit of time, so having a gate here doesn't actually slow the display down. So now on to the next pixel, onto the pixels. I'll have to go up to the roof. So each pixel starts is a 4x4 pixel, 4x4 blocks large. So this is 1 pixel. So what happens is that to explain how the map achieves 32 colors, unlike previous map displays that SafBling or other creators have made, in the past they used majority colors. So basically what happens is that if this is brown and this is brown, since there are 3 browns here, you know that the majority color is brown, so therefore the pixel will be brown. Or the exact same thing for orange. If there's more than 1 orange, in this case it becomes the majority color, it becomes orange. But what I found out is that when there are no majority colors, meaning each of the 16 blocks in one pixel, if all of them are different colors, it will result in the color of the northwesternmost block. So in this case, since there's no majority colors, this will be gray and this is light gray all the way down below. If there are no majority colors, you can put any block you want. So if I wanted it to be the color of dirt, if I wanted it to be the color of dirt, I just put the dirt block there, and now it's the color of dirt. Okay, so as you can see, the second row and second column colors have changed at the exact same time because I put stone blocks there. If I remove it, only the top leftmost pixel has changed color. Because I didn't alter any of the shaders, you can see that the next row, the next pixel down, is supposed to be red, but it is slightly off. That's because I have to explain why shaders are important, but basically that is supposed to be the same color as the rest of the image, but since I've added this block here and didn't change any of the shaders, it has caused this red block here, or I mean the red pixel here, to be a darker shade. So in order to prevent shading issues, that's why you have additional glass blocks here, 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 and here. No, this is the indicator for column selection. So you have the roof to have an average, a point to take the average height, goes down here, and onto the pixel. So when both rail lines are activated at the exact same time, the row line being 2 ticks to activate this redstone line, and the blue rail being 1 tick, so it's back to back, 2 ticks, activates the column, the comparator, toggles the trapdoor, sends a signal down the wall, received by observer, received by redstone repeater, 2 ticks, to make it a 2 tick signal, received by the redstone torch, and when the redstone torch turns off, this repeater turns off. The repeater here is no longer locked, and when it's no longer locked, it receives either a shade or color signal through the observer this rail line here, all the way down here, through that observer into the repeater, and if no signal is received, this repeater remains off when it is locked again. But if a signal is received, like here, red being the signal color that is being selected, at the exact moment that this repeater turns back on, this repeater is already on, so it locks it in the on state, so it doesn't spit out blocks or anything, it just extends or retracts the piston. So that means for every pixel, the most number of changes when it comes to pistons is 5. So that's the highest number of pistons that change. So, and that is the case for however many colors you decide to add, because this display can actually have more than 32 colors. In fact, you can actually make it 64 colors if you wanted to, but every 8 colors you add, there will be 2 redstone tick delay. So that is 0.2 seconds delay. So 0.2 times 0.2 times 2. So this is a 32 color display. If I want to double it, is 32 divided by 8 for So it's 4 times 20, making it a 64 color display would introduce an additional 0.8 seconds delay. So this is for the color column, and for the shade column, as you can see, I'll move further back over here. So the display, each pixel is actually split into groups of 8. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then a shade block, another 8, and a shade block. So the shade block, it uses the exact same system, except the pistons are reversed. The piston doesn't need to be here at this block here, because as long as the difference is altered correctly, it doesn't have to be at an interval of 1. I do this because there's no more space. So it pushes this gray glass over here to change the shade. So now that I've changed the shade, as you can see from the map, the red color has not changed. It has changed. It's supposed to be red, but one is lighter and one is darker. So you want to avoid that as much as possible. Where did where did the block go? There we go. Alright, so basically what happens is that when it jumps from one set to the next, the shader gets shifted too. So if I have the topmost set, it means that the bottommost shader will be activated. If I have the second topmost stack, that means the second lowest shader would be activated. That means that average height wise, this block here and this block and this block here have the exact same average height, because when you've increased it by, so you drop down by in this case 18 blocks, you increase the height of the shade block by 18 blocks, so it averages out. It's perfectly fine. So now when you want to, so now that we know that the average height for the tallest or whatever number inside a set is exactly the same as the next set, you can figure out how to alter it such that the average height is within tolerance for both pixels in a column. So through a lot of testing, I figured out that you want to get the average difference in height from one pixel to the next to be less than 0.75. If it's 0.75, it will only change it do the shading if it's positive or negative, depending on whether it's an odd or even column. Is a bit weird. So you need to try to get it less than 0.75 for simplicity's sake. If it's greater than it, then if let's say you don't do any changes in the average height at all without the shading block at all, this block would be higher than this, since it's 4x4, so the difference is actually divided by 16, so this would still work. But let's say we are doing a 1x1 pixel display, a 1x1 block for each pixel. This would create a shading difference. So you want it to be less than 0.75. And so since we know that the 4 sets have the same average, so the bottommost of each set is the exact same and the second one of each set is the same, you just need to figure out how to get sets of 8 to be within the 0.75 difference. So what happens is that, let me pick a different color. So when I'll go down below, if you see here, this is the bottommost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So the difference in in 15 blocks actually exceeds the 0.75. So if that was on and this was on, it will create a shade difference, and therefore you get one lighter, one darker. So you don't want that. But if you only have 7 colors here, so let's say the topmost one is on, and here it will be within 0.75. So the only one that exceeds 0.75 is the white. So whenever the white block is selected, or the bottommost in each set is selected, what would happen is that this shade block would fire. So if this shade block is, if white is selected, what happens is that this gets moved up in its place, so it gets moved up by 1, moved up by 2. So it means it moves up by 1, moves up by 2. If you get rid of that, just assume that it trades off the average height, and now it falls within the 0.75 difference. That is why you need 2 shader columns, one for in between each set and one for inside each set to control the average inside each set. So that allows you to get the average difference for each pixel, no matter what color you pick, whether the highest or the lowest, or from white to gray over here, it will be within 0.75. And then you have your floor base here. The white concrete and black concrete are pretty much useless, because this column, the shader for this column is always on, at least one of them is on. This is also pretty much useless. This one here is important, and the lapis lazuli block here is not really important, but it is, like I said in my previous video, it's like the blue screen of death. So it just shows you when nothing is on. You can put a unique block here, emerald, or whatever block, other block you choose, to tell you that absolutely nothing is on. So that is how the main part of the display works. And oh yeah, when you do copy and pasting, from west to east, copy pasting west to east, it's fine. You just copy everything, so you double it up, should be fine. But from north to south, when you double it up, you will double it. You copy from the first block to this is the last block. You double it up, and then you need to add another row of blocks here, such that your wall blocks are sticking to the left and right. So that is how the display works over here. And yep, that's about it for that. Now it's just the control circuits. Control circuits are very simple. So you have for the manual input, you have your levers here to change the piston, whether it's going to be a signal is going to be sent through or not. Over here you have your single selector. It selects one of these four, sends a signal through to 2 separate lines that control this pistons here to determine whether what is on and what is off. So now both of them are off. That means that it's in a column. If I have one of them on and one of them off, only one of them will turn on here, sends a signal down here, there, sends it to the instant line. The instant line for the preset signals, every time you toggle the lever, an observer pulse will be sent into, in this case, powered rails here, and here, which will update observers that will send a signal down the activator rail here. Down here, move over here, same thing, except now that is whenever you toggle it, it will update activator lines and send signal down the powered rail lines through the instant rail here. I couldn't find one that worked in all directions reliably. So I just use this. So it's always on when a 1 tick pulse is sent. This piston will fire, pushing this redstone out of the way. The rail will turn off, instantly updating, and it will be fine. When this is pushed down here, the note block will be down here and turns on. It causes this piston to update and push everything back up. That's how the instant rail line works. Then you have your instant vertical component up here, sending a signal straight up. So it pulls it down and then pushes it back up, activating here right before the router. And not much else. These are for shading such that everything else on the selector panel is in the same color. If you removed it, it would appear a little weird, so if I just move it, alright, you can't see it in its current configuration, but trust me when I say that it's important. Yep, that's about it. This button resets individual pixels, so if I select that, that pixel goes into the blue screen of death pixel, so that means everything else is off. And yep, so that's it for the display. For the program, it's very simple. I'll go to this one here. So when this when note block is updated, the observer will update, sending a signal every 4 ticks, back and up and down, and then when it hits, because there is a delay, because there's a 1 tick delay here already, it only needs 3 ticks at this point, so there's an extra note block here, and it continues onwards. So every 10, every 10 blocks there'll be 3 tick delay here, so that with the addition of that 1 tick here to propagate the signal forward, it'll be 4 ticks each individual line. It will send a signal be received here every 4 ticks. So it updates the observer, sends a signal down the rail, powers this, goes through down here, and that's sending it all the way to the router. And yep, that's about it. I hope I've explained this well enough. If you have any questions, leave it in the comment section. Thank you for listening into my video, and like and subscribe for more content.